Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to our very first live podcast with Politics for the Culture. And today I have with me an awesome, great friend of mine who took the opportunity to join us tonight. And we're going to have a very great conversation. And her name is Dr. Shawana Coleman. She is the founder and CEO of Eclectic Education. And she is very I would call her a guru of education because whenever I need a question or want to call her about something, I do contact her a lot. And she's also my best friend. So I'm really excited for us to be able to sit here and have this conversation with you. So I want Dr. Shawana Coleman to introduce a little bit about herself and what she do and what eclectic education is all about.
Wow, that was some kind of an introduction. I don't even know if I could live up to all of that tonight, but I'll try. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I mean, it's only taken us almost a year and a half to finally get me on the podcast. Schedules conflicting, me backing out, but I could not tell her no this time. I am Dr. Shawana Coleman. It's a little weird still being called doctor, but Dr. Shawana Coleman. And I am the founder of Eclectic Educational Solutions and the founder of Eclectic Education as well. And I've been in education. It's 2021 now, so 12 years, 13, maybe a little more. I started in education a little bit weird, kind of backwards. Started off being a consultant, fresh out of undergrad. A little bit while I was still in undergrad, and then decided, hey, I think I want to do education, and got a degree, my master's in education, and then kept going from there, assistant teacher, teaching, transition over into nonprofits. I probably did a little bit of everything that a teacher could possibly do in a school building and with the school district, from leadership to working with the leadership team in schools, almost everything you could think of. Demonstration teacher, all those things. And then I started writing and developing curriculum, running programs internationally for a top nonprofit organization, one of the largest for youth, and still in nonprofits. And then I founded my own, an author as well. And most recently, founded a nonprofit organization that I'm super excited about, and super excited about the things to come with it.
Thank you so much for sharing your extensive resume, because it's very extensive. More than
girl.
You don't like to talk about herself, but I'm one of those boost your friends type people because she boosts my head all the time. So she like, y'all, I'll tell you, she's awesome. But today's conversation is going to be about equity versus equality, with the focus of neutrality in the classroom. And as you all know, we just started a new administration since yesterday, and I'm very excited to see what this new administration is going to bring with us, especially in the field of education. And before we kind of get into our discussion, I want to ask Dr. Coleman, how did you feel about yesterday's momentum, and also knowing that now we have an educator, a woman who is an educator, still is an educator, and her husband is now taking the throne of president? Like, how did that moment feel for you?
Wow. The moment was amazing for me, and it was momentous for me in so many different ways. One, I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and so I was super excited to see my soror up there breaking glass ceilings. Like, that was the most amazing part. But as you said, not in the past administration, but the one before that, the Obama administration, we had our first lady, forever first lady, Michelle Obama. And she definitely made some strides in education. She did a lot because she's a highly educated woman. However, to actually have an educator that's the first lady of the United States in the position that she's in, I know that some things are going to shift and change, because it's a difference from being in education in the sense of going through school, getting different degrees, having kids in the system, versus being boots on the ground. It's completely different. Knowing what the needs are, knowing some of the things that you have faced as an educator. So I am I'm so excited to see. And I know today I saw a post where she was actually doing a live and some type of a webinar today. And I was like, that's what I'm talking about.
For me, it was the moment I was at work today and we had this kind of the same conversation. And one thing that I said was struck out to me the most was like seeing seeing the Black girl magic, everybody like Miss Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris, and like seeing how they looked at each other and they did like the pound. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, that really like touched home for me, because I feel like so many times as Black women, and especially being a woman of color, we are in places and positions in our field and we don't oftentimes share the magic sometimes. And to see that these women can still exist in politics from different cultures, different backgrounds, and be like, okay, we got this together. And I know that Kamala Harris is going to do a great and awesome job as VP as well as President Biden. I'm very excited about this journey. And also, shout out to Dr. Jill, because I know she has a whole lot of things that she would probably definitely want to share, being an experienced educator. So, but after now that we've kind of playing the field of, talking about a little bit of yesterday's news, talk a little bit about what made you go into the field of education. Like, what inspired that moment for you? Because I know you as a friend, and I know what your majors were, and to see you transition and say, and this goes back to what we talk about all the time. Like when you go to college, baby, I changed my major like 3 times. This is more of a funny conversation that we're also having. So talk a little bit about that, Dr. Coleman.
So I don't think anything is by happenstance, and that, everything is for a reason. So my bachelor's degree is in mass communications, public relations with a minor in marketing. And so I do use it. I have to use it because I am doing so much with my own business. So I'm grateful to have it. But I mean, I'm just now using it. And I've used it in the nonprofit sector a little bit as well. But it's nothing that I ever worked in. As a matter of fact, I had an internship that in public relations that made me say, I do not want to do this. No shade at all. Absolutely love her. Zakia, you know her. That's she's also a relative of mine. And I had my internship working under her at the Jackson Medical Mall. She is amazing at what she does. But she was behind the scenes so much, making things happen. And I thought that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be behind the scenes. And so like I enjoyed it. But I used to love the day she'd be like, go out and do this and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay. So I'm like, I get to see people today. We're not in the office. And I realized then, like, public relations, the behind the scenes piece was not something I wanted to do. The marketing piece of being behind the scenes was not something I wanted to do. I like people. I like being around lots of people. And now I'm so I can tell she do too, because she's doing things out in the public, and she was amazing. And I'm so glad that I got to learn a lot under her. But it definitely put me in a space of saying, hey, this may not be what I want to do. So I kind of tumbled into education, grew up in the household of an educator. And so that was one piece of it, although I was told on a daily basis, do not go into education. They don't make enough money and they're not respected. All of those things are true. But I'm a born educator. I was a kid lining up teddy bears and dolls, teaching to them, like literally spanking them. And they weren't even spanking us at school, but spanking the dolls, doing the work for them, marking it wrong, fussing because you got it wrong. As now that I think about it, I probably need some therapy because that was a little weird as a kid. But I was doing that as a kid, and so it was just in me. It was something that I knew that I wanted to do, but I was always told not to. And so when I got my first job, fresh out of undergrad, I was working as a consultant. So I was consulting for teachers that were veteran teachers. And I was helping with the MCT2 testing for middle school students. And I had like 2 or 3 different schools that I was helping with. And I was like, hey, I kind of like this. So then I applied for an assistant teaching position. I was like, let me kind of test the waters. Tested the waters a little bit, worked under an amazing educator, Ms. Holmes, Gabrielle Holmes. And she was amazing in Camp Public School District. She taught me everything I knew and was like, hey, you're a natural. Like, what are you doing? So I started working on my master's, and in its the next school year she was leaving, and so I took over the classroom that she was in, that I was an assistant teacher in the year before. And so that's how I got into education, and I just kind of never left. And you know, they were right. I was a natural at being a teacher, and just education in general kind of sucked me in.
You know, life always takes us on different paths we never thought we would go in. Because I remember as a kid, I was like, I never go into politics. I don't even know what I was saying. I just knew I was saying something. And look at where I am now. I can't get away from it. I love what I do. I love being a public servant when my service is definitely available to the public, and being able to have conversations like these, because like I always say on my podcast, that everything ties into politics. And what I always try to do is figure out, how does this connect? And I'm glad that I'm able to connect this when I'm getting ready to, what I'm about to ask you is the main reason why we're here is the equity versus equality pieces. And so you being in like your path has taken you to different districts, from Mississippi to Georgia, and being able to work inside the classroom, outside the classroom. Talk a little bit about what is equity versus equality in the classroom.
That's a deep topic. It's so many layers, so many boxes to be unwrapped. But to, I guess, kind of scratch the surface of it, because it's only surface level. Equity versus equality looks just the same as it does when we're talking politically, we're talking about socioeconomic statuses. All of those tie in together, and we know that education is impacted by all of that. And so equity versus equality is exactly what it is. Being equal is having the exact same things as someone else, and having those exact same opportunities as someone else. But equity means, although I have the exact same opportunities, I may need a few more resources in order to access them. I may need a few more resources in order to understand what's happening. So just because you give me the same books, you give me the same amount of teachers in my building, that doesn't mean that each one of those teachers are highly qualified for these positions to teach these students. And so oftentimes what we see is, in some of the areas that are higher in socioeconomic statuses, that's where the teachers flock to, and the educators flock to, even funders flock to, because they want those already successful stories. And it's a little bit easier to walk into those classrooms, because you know that those kids may already have parents at home that have already had them with tutors, that they speak 2 languages and 3 languages already. You don't have to work as hard. Whereas in some of the lower socioeconomic areas, you would find that some of those teachers are, nothing against them, Teach for America teachers that are only going to be there 2-3 years and then they're moving on. They may have the same textbooks, but they may not have as many resources that are there. And even in some instances, you'll find where, you know, like the tax brackets and taxes in some areas, when you're pulling it from the higher socioeconomic status areas, the amount of taxes that they get is amazing. Even if it's the same percentage, it's amazing in those areas for the resources that they can get, versus somewhere in the lower socioeconomic status area. So just because the tax percentage that you're getting off of it is 3%, 3% on this side of town looks like one thing, and 3% on this side of town looks like something completely and totally different. And so the funding isn't necessarily the same there. It doesn't look the same. It doesn't feel the same. So that's where the equity versus equality come in at. I've worked in some areas, in some organizations, where I'm looking and I'm like, hey, you have this and it's great. Yes, it is. Why is it here? And why is it always here? And you're offering it here. Yeah, you're going to offer it to them, but you know, they don't have the same resources to say, yes, we'll take it, because they can't hold up to whatever the requirements are that you have for them, versus another area that can say, hey, we got offered that same opportunity. We have a donor that's going to give us $1 million to make it happen. And they're going to jump on it and they're going to take it. Whereas this area needs it the most. And instead of you meeting them halfway, you know, you're in a space where they're like, I can't do it. You know, we don't have the resources to make it happen. So that's a little bit, and hopefully it made sense of equity versus equality. And that's really why I picked up the nonprofit side of Eclectic Educational Solutions to do Eclectic Ed, because I said, you know, I'm seeing too often. And Shawana, this is a conversation you and I have had oftentimes, and I'm trying to be.
Where are you going with this? So let's talk about it.
I work in nonprofits, so I'm trying to kind of still be politically correct on here. But it's one of those things where I'm like, we got to stop money chasing and check chasing, as we call it, where we're going to the money after starting something in one area, and we're saying, okay, we did a little bit, but it's more money on this, so we're gonna run over here and you know, get the money there, and we're kind of leaving people hanging and on the hanger. And so it's like, at what point are we going to stop allowing people, organizations, businesses, whoever they are that are forming these new organizations, to stop getting money off the backs of the minorities, the low socioeconomic status areas, because it's not always minorities that are in those areas. Stop getting money off the back of them to fund whatever your ventures are, and then taking the bulk of the resources, or even a minimum amount of the resources, and to another area that don't even need it. They already have these programs happening there. And so while you're offering it, it's equal. Yeah, you're offering it, it's equal, but it's not equity. It's kind of like that picture, if you've ever seen it, where they have all of the stair steppers and they're all the same size, but everyone is a different height. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I don't need one stair stepper, I need 3. So while, you know, we equal in this, level the playing field for us. And so I think that's what's happening in America right now. People are starting to level the playing field for us. And that's kind of what we saw yesterday. And so I'm going to be quiet because I know I just said a lot.
No, that was all good. And I'm glad you spoke on all of that. And Lindsay Ramsey said the aftershock of the No Child Left Behind.
Yes, No Child Left Behind leaves a lot of children behind. As a matter of fact, they never even got on the bus. They didn't even make the school stop. Let's be real.
And, you know, when you talked about not having the same opportunities, you know, I raised a statement earlier today with colleagues of mine, and I said, you know, I so happened to go into the office today, and for those of you, I've transitioned to early childhood education. I came from a social justice, you know, background, and now I'm in the field of education, so I'm seeing a lot and being able to have conversations with a lot of like childcare providers and things like that. And so I really thought this conversation was very needed to be had, especially with what we're going into right now politically. And one thing I saw was like, you know, in order to get certain types of money for your children here, because I'm residing in Pennsylvania, you have to be a certain percentage of the poverty line. So you have 100%, 200%, 300%. And as I was looking at the percentage of what that 100% is, 200%, and looking at the salaries that you have to be and how many children in your house or how many in the household that has to be present, I started looking at like, oh my gosh, like I have to make at least 19,000 to be at 100% or 16,000, you know. And it was like, and so I asked my colleague, I said, what is the minimum wage? And it's just $7.25, right? And I'm sitting here looking like, and I went, and everything I do, I try to connect it, because Mississippi will always be home. And I went, I said, Mississippi, I think it's still $7.25, and we're in 2021. And it's like, how do people think that families are surviving, you know, financially inside the home, and then having to send their children to a classroom or to a child care provider and expect them to be able to be educated when they already have difficult situations at home? And it's very hard, because we don't want to not only pay families what they worth, we don't want to pay teachers what they worth. And it's going to go into the next question I have to talk to you about, because when you did your dissertation, you talked about the retention rate, mostly in Mississippi. But there's a high percentage of like teachers who are now leaving the classroom. So I wanted to ask you, you know, being the fact that teachers do not get paid a lot here in America, I'm going to say America because it's not just certain states, like teachers don't get paid what they're worth. What is your stance on it, and how do you feel like that if teacher pay will increase, how will the education system be today?
It's mighty funny that you even bring up my dissertation, because of course initially when I started my research, I was looking at, I already know it's going to be paid. That's the reason why people are leaving. Then I thought about myself and I said, well, I guess pay did kind of play a factor when they told me how much they were paying for the other job. But it wasn't the biggest factor for me as to why I was leaving. It was teacher burnout for me. Most people thought that it would be paid as well, and that's what I thought it would be, because I did mine on a rural school district in the state of Mississippi, and that's not what it was. It wasn't pay. It was a factor, but it wasn't pay. Pay is a big deal though, because those teachers that are in states like Mississippi that the starting salary may be right at $30,000, $31,000. They can come to Georgia and they're getting started off at like $45,000. Sometimes $50,000, depends on where you are on the scale.
It's the same too. Like I think most people transition to Texas, so they get paid a lot more.
Right, they get paid, tremendously more than an area like the state of Mississippi. So when you start thinking about that, you're like, dang, like that's a lot. And people say, oh, well, the cost of living is different. Yes and no, because when I was in Mississippi, I was working in Canton Public School District. And I like my apartment in that area that I was kind of on the outskirts in Madison County. I think my apartment was like $575, and it was really big and it was really nice, and it was a new complex. And so that, and then I came out here and I got an apartment a little bit larger than that, and it was right outside of Atlanta. And no, it wasn't in a bad area. It was in Marietta. And I was paying $625, so it wasn't that big of a difference to go from $31,000 to, at the time I think it was like $45. And then I was working on I had finished my master's, so that went up some, and then I finished my doctorate and it went up a little bit more. So it was like that was a big difference. And so I went from living a real minimalist lifestyle to saying, hey, how was I surviving? Like, I don't even understand how I was surviving, but I mean, it's where you are, and it is survival, as you say. And so I do think that if they pay teachers more, that more people will probably consider the field. Teaching used to be one of those areas where they would say, hey, if all else fails, you can go be a teacher. It is not if all else fails anymore, because it's so much responsibility. Like, you are responsible for so many things, so much accountability for everything. If a student doesn't pass the test, it's your fault. And it's like, how is it my fault? This kid doesn't even come to school. Like, when are we going to look at the parents? If something goes wrong with anything, it's your fault. The administrators, it's your fault. Being a principal is the scariest thing in the world in some school districts, or in some areas in school districts, because you can be the most amazing principal ever, but if those students aren't passing tests with the right scores, then what does it matter? Your head is on the chopping block. You're about to go. And so people oftentimes talk about like what was happening with the scandal with the Atlanta Public Schools teachers. And, I know a little bit about it because of watching the stuff that's on the news and things, but I couldn't even dive too deep into that, because it was like, it made my heart break looking at people that were just like me, that were going through this because they were fearful of losing a job. So it's like, hey, I got to do what I got to do. These kids got to pass. There were some bonuses and stuff tied to these. It's like, I get a little bit more money, we'll figure it out. And so it's just disheartening. And then it's like the level of respect for teachers and things of that nature in education, it's all out the window. You are wrong no matter what. You know how you go to a department store or a restaurant, the customer is always right. Well, in school, the teacher is always wrong. Like, and it's like, where is the support? Now, I was blessed to be in schools where I had support. Like, they were supporting me. And they supported us as teachers. Even like we were in a meeting with the parent, it was like, nope, hold up, you're not gonna come at my teacher like that. And even if we were in the wrong, sometimes they would have a back end me, like, oh, that I really had to cover you. But it was always like, look, we want the best of the best there. And I think our students deserve the best of the best. And so I really hope that there's a shift with, us having a FLOTUS that is an educator, a shift in pay for teachers, a shift in the respect for educators, all of those things, because it is a field that I adore the teachers that I work with. I love going into their classrooms. I know that they love the work that they do, but the level of respect is not there. We need that back. We need it back. We need parents to start advocating for teachers again. This is a pandemic we are in. Let me tell y'all, the frontline workers right now are educators.
Educators, yeah.
They had to snap into some stuff that I'm like, oh, child, I'm glad I'm out of the classroom, because I don't know if I could have been virtual with them like that, because they had to shift and change. And I know if I had to do it, I would have did it, because, I mean, you own every day. You walk in, you own every day. But it's like, they deserve some raises. I know out here in Georgia, they're giving the teachers, I think, $1,000 bonus, which still ain't enough.
Nah, but kudos to Georgia for even considering it.
That part. And so it's exciting to see it happening, but at the same time, it's like these are frontline workers. They are kids' parents, because they're closer to a mama or a daddy than that these kids would ever see. I've had to feed kids, clothe kids. I've had to make sure that they could pay senior dues. I didn't have to, but because I have the heart that I have and I'm an educator for the right reasons, I was doing these things. And it's like, you already paying me breadcrumbs, and I got to take my little breadcrumbs and give them away. Like, what I'm going to eat today? And it's just disheartening. And so I know I kind of swayed off a little bit, but
it's good, because someone just said, I so needed to hear this because I'm in school now for education. Thank you. I think her name is Raquel Baker. So thank you for even tuning in. And it kind of go into the next question I was going to ask you. Being that there are so many people who are in the field of education, graduates who just graduated here recently, people like her who, going to school for it. And right now we're in the middle of a pandemic, right? And being the fact that, like what you said, educators are the frontline workers right now, along with, your nurses and your doctors and everything like that. What advice could you give someone who's going into the field of education and started their first year as an educator? And I know, although you've been out of the field for a while, I know the position and work that you do, you are still tied into seeing what that looks like, and just want to know, what could you possibly give them to take away from that?
The first thing that I would say is just flat out, thank you. Thank you for being who you are, and for staying steadfast and solid during this time. I know that there are a lot of educators that have shifted, they have left, and they're like, okay, I'm done. What I will say is, let this experience from this year be your experience, and it be what you experience and not what someone else is saying. It's one of those things where, you are doing more now than you've ever had to do. And don't get me wrong, teachers have always had the weight of the world on their backs. They've always had the weight of the world on their shoulders, but now even more so, because you're having to look for even deeper signs of things that you probably wouldn't even have seen with a child inside of a classroom. You're having to be even more creative. And so I just say, take this time to expand your portfolio. Expand your resume, because right now you are a computer technologist, you are a counselor, even more than what you were in the classroom physically. You are everything you could be. You're an administrator right now. You're everything. And so take those skills that you're learning now and translate them into something that can even help you grow or help you get to the next level, or even develop something to help the next teachers that come along. Right now, what I will say is, you are learning firsthand, especially this your first year, firsthand on how being an educator means you are on at all times, and you have to shift the narrative in the middle of things no matter what. It's kind of like, when I'm explaining to people, I say, it kind of reminds me of the days when I was in the classroom and I walk in with this amazing lesson that I had created, and I think it's the best thing in the world, and they're going to really enjoy this. And I'm talking, and them kids looking at me like, what you talking about? And I'm like, hold up. And then I have to shift and switch into another gear, like instantly. And that's what they had to do, shift into another gear. I will also advise to say, look at the way that your district has treated you. Look at the way that your principals have supported you, and you need to start trying to make some decisions of your own. Like, is this the district that I want to be in? Is this the administrator I want to work for? Because that it speaks a lot being in the middle of a pandemic. If your administrator hasn't checked on you and said like, hey, how you doing? Not the how you doing of how the kids doing in school, but how are you doing mentally, emotionally, then that's a problem for me. And it should be a problem for you as well. Because what we say, Shalonda, self-care is very important. And even in the midst of this, some states are still dealing with testing and things of that nature. And I remember my first year of teaching, I had a principal who got on the last of the nerves that I had, but she was an amazing principal. And we were in the midst of having to turn around the school. We're going to be taken over by the state. And she used to drill us. Oh, she used to ride our back so bad. And I was like, I can't wait till this lady leave, or I leave, or something. But excuse me, the one thing that she did say, and the one thing she did do was she said, listen, even the greatest of teachers need a day. So when you need your day, you need to take your day. Because I don't want you in here snapping off on my kids. I don't want you in here losing your mind. You're no worth to anybody, not even yourself or your family, if you laid up in the hospital somewhere. And so if they haven't shown concern for you as a person, I'm not saying leave the field of education. What I am saying is you need to take some time to evaluate if this is a situation for you, this is a school for you, the district for you, or whatever it is, and make sure that you're in a place where you feel just as supported and that they are supporting you. They're providing you with any type of professional development and things that you need, because it's a hard shift having to be completely virtual. It's a hard shift. And so I just say, hang in there. We love you. I love you. I'm so happy that kids have teachers that have been willing to stay on board and to do these things. And take care of yourself and make sure you're looking for those signs of being burnt out on your own. And if you need a day, take a day. And now that don't mean take no whole week on them kids, but it means take your day if you need a day.
Yeah, my auntie, she chimed in. She said, not during the pandemic. Teachers have always gone overboard for their students. And I agree, Bobby.
I agree.
You talked a lot. You mentioned about being a first-year teacher, which is going to bring into my next question. You are not only just an educator consultant, but you're also an author. First-year frenzy, right? And so I want to ask you to talk a little bit about First Year Frenzy. Where can people find the book and all that type of stuff? Because I feel like that a lot of teachers who go into the field of education, they do not know a lot of things. So just kind of educate me. Honestly, I was with you when you wrote the book. I just didn't read.
Y'all can't read my book, y'all. But I'm no copy of the book, y'all. But it's cool because she's not in
though. I'm an honest friend though.
Don't worry about it. I'm gonna put one in your box that I send to you, okay? So First Year Frenzy was birthed out of me having gone through my master's degree, getting the degree, and also working in a school under an amazing teacher. Like I said, she was amazing. And so what I learned was that you don't know what you're doing. Well, let me back up. I didn't know what I was doing, okay? I thought being a teacher was you show up in the classroom and you open the textbook. Y'all remember how it was when we was in school. Don't act. Y'all know they gave us a textbook and they were like, read page 78 and answer all the questions at the end of the chapter and write the definitions down. Okay, so that's what I thought I was going to do. So I was going to go to the classroom and tell them to read that and read this. I got in there. They talking about scope and sequence and everything. I'm like, what is this? Like, ain't nobody tell me about no scope and sequence. What is that? Ain't nobody tell me about I knew I had to have lesson plans. I didn't know about no standards. What you mean a standard? Standard what? Standard operating procedures? Like, what you talking about? And so she had to walk me through all of that. And I realized they're not teaching us what we need in college. Like, not for real. Like, they're teaching you some of the textbook style stuff, but not how to navigate the nuances of a school building, getting in there. What do you do with the classroom? You put the desk all around in order. Like, how do I how do I evaluate the students and look at something and say, okay, I might need to reteach this method? Like, what does the small groups really look like? They didn't teach us any of that. And then I got a co-teacher. Who is this? Are you in my classroom too? Like, you watching me? You telling on me? So I was trying to figure out what's all of this stuff that's happening. And when I realized that, hi Brandy. And I'm gonna get to her in a second too. Love you. But I realized that people didn't know. Like, they didn't know. And I'm gonna speak for myself again. I didn't know. And so after I learned, I said, if I didn't know, somebody else didn't know either. And I started developing like just a plan for writing this book. And so the book, it touches on preparing for the new year, like going into the physical classroom. I might need to do one now for a virtual classroom. But going into a new school year and actually figuring out how to set up your desk, how to communicate with the parents, how to communicate with the students, lesson planning for the 21st century learner. What does that look like? What is differentiated instruction? I know now all this stuff is starting to shift and change, but what does this look like? How do I teach all of these kids? Like, I was completely dumbfounded with the fact that there were students in my classroom on different levels. So you know that they learn on different levels, but then it's like, then you have a teacher that pushes into your class versus them being pulled out. So how do you collaborate with your co-teacher? What does that look like? Team planning, providing feedback and using the data. And then after the bell, you knowing that, hey, you know, you're a neighborhood superstar at this point. So when you're in the grocery store, you're not just in the grocery store as yourself and shopping. You're in the grocery store as a teacher, an administrator. And these kids are watching everything you do, and your life is not your own anymore. So whatever you do as an educator, I tell people, as an educator, whatever you do, if you wouldn't want it on the front page of your local newspaper, don't do it. Because they're going to put a principal, an assistant principal, a teacher, a football, basketball coach, anybody working with a kid on the front of a newspaper before they put anyone else up there. And so that's how First Year Frenzy became a thing. And it's now being used in school districts in the state of Mississippi as well as in the state of Georgia. And Dr. Johnson is on here now. She is also one of the administrators that has used First Year Frenzy a couple of years in her schools. And I've done a few book studies with some of her teachers as well. And so when I tell you, for me, and it's my opinion, and you know, hey, it's my opinion, it's my book too. So I'm biased, but I think it is a great tool for teachers and a great tool for administrators to have for their educators, just to kind of get started, especially those that are coming straight out of school and going into the classrooms. And it can be found on Amazon. I would prefer if you bought it on my website, eclecticeducation.com. But if you want to get it off Amazon, you can, and you can write a book review on there too. That will be great. But this is not the one you'll get. You'll get this one. This picture came from the Los Angeles Times, so I wanted my picture on the front of my own book.
Oh, yeah. So she's awesome. Yeah. Dr. Johnson, Brandon Johnson, said that she has definitely used this book in her mentoring programs in high school, and it's a great tool. So if it's being used in certain districts, I can only imagine the use it could be for people who are going into the education for the first year. And I always feel like sometimes a lot of people, we talk about this all the time, Dr. Coleman, is that we don't sometimes know like the levels of where we can go in our careers, the steps we can take, and everything like that. And I always feel like it's very important that some people know. And you transition outside of the classroom and you went into the nonprofit sector, right? And you have a lot of aspirations still as an educator, although you're no longer in the classroom. What was that transition like for you? And like, what made you do that shift outside of the classroom to go into the nonprofit sector?
Wow. So what was the transition like? First of all, I guess I'll start there. The transition was hard. when I say hard, I mean it was a hard transition for me. Mainly because I was an educator at heart, and the nonprofit that I transitioned to was kind of ran more like a corporation than a school building, and it was completely different than what I was used to. I went from making lesson plans to developing curriculum, running a program from afar, having to tell people what to do, how to do it, creating training videos, using Excel. And let me tell y'all, Excel was something I did not know how to do. But it was very interesting. I actually and I'm gonna be honest, my first week on the job, maybe the first 2 weeks on the job, I cried, y'all. I cried, and then I called my former supervisor back, and I was like, my job's still available. I want to come back. He was like, what's wrong with you, girl? And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. But again, I can't say everywhere I've gone, I've had people that have been in my corner that have been like, no, you know, you can do this. Dr. Johnson, again, was one of those people that saw something in me as a teacher, and she signed me up to be a demonstration classroom teacher. She wasn't even my academic coach. She was a science coach. I was history. And she was like, oh, you're going to be good. You can do this. And I did it. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I'm okay then. And so that's what the transition was like. Once I transitioned and I learned the work, I enjoyed it thoroughly because I was able to impact not just the kids in my classroom with 30, 35 students at a time, maybe like with 200 and some students a year. I was able to impact hundreds of thousands of kids across the United States and internationally. And so that's what that was like completely. And I think did you ask what was the second part of the question? I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. I asked you what the transition was like. You know, you made me forget because I was just so caught up.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I think you were asking, and did you say how can people?
Oh yeah. So for people who are in the field of education, and some of those who don't know, there are different career paths outside of the field of just being a teacher. What was it? What would you tell them as far as like getting in nonprofit sector, but still working in the education field?
Okay, so the education sector is wide open. When I first got into education, I was thinking teacher, maybe academic coach, assistant principal, assistant superintendent. Mm-hmm. Maybe a librarian, basketball coach, football coach, music teacher, things like that. I had no idea that there was a world out there. The textbooks, somebody has to write them. The curriculum, someone has to develop them. The lesson plans, there are people that actually write lesson plans for school districts now. Just all types of things, the programs that are coming to your school, someone is doing that. And so for you to just keep yourself in a box, it's absurd. It's so many different things that you can do. Being a consultant, and you can still impact students across the board. And so when I was working on my doctorate, I took a break for a year because I was like, I don't know if I want to be a principal anymore, because I did. Once I got into nonprofit, I was like, I'm not sure I want to be a principal anymore. I like what I'm doing. But it also opened my eyes to a world of possibilities. So know that there are so many different things you can do. If teaching is for you, teaching is for you. Some people love teaching and they don't ever want to leave it. Some people like education and they do not want to be in the classroom with anybody's children. And if you don't want to be there with anybody's children, guess what? You need to go. Because what we don't want is for you to be mistreating kids, for you to be mean and grouchy every day, because they're going to remember that for the rest of their lives. And then somebody that may have wanted to be a teacher, you've just turned them off from it. You need to go about your business. And maybe you need to be somewhere writing curriculum. Maybe you need to be somewhere developing the master schedules for schools and districts. Maybe you need to be a registrar. Maybe you being in the classroom may not be it, but it's so many different pathways in education. College professors, directors of programs, associates of education, so many different things that you can do. You just need to make sure that the skills that you are building, the ones that you have garnered through all the work that you're doing, that they are building upon something and that you're not remaining stagnant, because that's what happens a lot. If you want to transition out, you have to make sure that you're expanding your portfolio and your resume, because just being a teacher in the classroom won't be enough. It's just like any other field. You have to be a jack of all trades, a master of a few, but a jack of all trades.
You know, I'm actually, when I talked about like I have transitioned to the education sector, so like I don't write curriculum or anything like that, but a lot of people don't know there is like you can be advocates of education. I am a public policy director in government affairs, and what I do is I advocate for early childhood educators and families. And so that is a whole nother conversation, another branch that you can also think about going into, because there are some people who need frontline people to be their voices, to elevate what's going on inside of education, to talk and communicate with legislators and representatives and telling them the issues that are happening in the field of education. And so for me, coming from a social justice lens and seeing, you know, the equity and equality pieces of what children and families are experiencing, I'm like, wow, I didn't realize that if we invested in early childhood education, we won't have to fight for criminal justice reform and voting rights and stuff, because we have to start them when they are early. Investing in education early can change the entire game for everything, for every other social justice issue that is out there, because you're now giving children and families the opportunity to have a high quality education, which goes into what I'm about to ask you, Dr. Coleman. What does a high quality education look like for you in the field?
Whew, that's a deep question. I think a high quality education is filled with opportunities of growth, opportunities of eye opening experiences. And as you just said, starting from the ground up, from birth, really before birth, like you need to be reading to your kids while they're still in the womb, but definitely from birth, reading with them, helping with all of their skill sets, their motor skills, everything, and just having those pieces there for early childhood education, giving them the opportunity to be able to have early childhood education, to be with quality educators that are there. Early childhood education is not just having a babysitter for them. It's actually having someone that's as close to being certified as possible, that are an expert in their fields, and also bridging that pipeline of early childhood education to elementary schools, knowing what's going to be needed in kindergarten and in first grade. Because believe it or not, kindergartners are already on the computer, starting programming and things and stuff of that nature. So it's like bridging that gap there to say, hey, we need to know what you need them to know before they get to you. So when they get to you, you aren't sitting here trying to figure it out. It means putting those resources, and that's where we go back to equity, not equality, putting those resources where they need to be. And so we're talking about equality. You're giving them the same amount of resources you're giving someone else, but they already have everything that they need, or only need just a little bit. Not saying to downgrade anything, but you may need to shift some funding so that it's a little bit more over here in the lower socioeconomic status areas, so that they can have the quality programs. And that's making sure that it's some real curriculum and real development activities that are there, and catching some of those things at younger ages. So you can understand if a child is dyslexic, you can get them the assistance that they need. And it doesn't cost you an arm and a leg to make it happen. If a child needs some assistance in another area, you're able to catch it at an earlier age and kind of get them the assistance that they need. And that's, to me, pretty much what that high quality education looks like. And expanding those opportunities of growth. I was fortunate enough to grow up in a household where I was able to explore the world and have opportunities beyond my backyard. And so I traveled. I was in museums. I did summer programs and all those things. And nowadays, like, these summer programs cost so much money. And I look back at it, and I know they paid a lot of money for me to go to places like Kids College at Jackson State and things like that. But those opportunities helped me to expand my growth. Like, I learned so much there that once I got to school, it's like, oh, I did this summer. And so I already knew what it was that I was doing. Those opportunities aren't always there. Sometimes, the free summer programs where you're just getting free lunch, maybe just playing sports, and that's it. It's like sometimes you need to, again, equity, give them the opportunities to go to some of these programs, and not just give it to them. Make sure that they know that it's there and that they have access to it. Make sure that, maybe it's a van that comes to pick them up, or a bus, Or when you're looking for funding, hey, it's a bus pass for parents to travel back and forth to get the kids and to drop them off and things of that nature. Plant them in the neighborhoods so that they can be there. And it's like it's all about making sure that they have the resources, that they're accessible, that the parents know that they're there, and that again, it's accessible, and there's a support system there to make sure that that they understand what they are and that they're taking advantage of them. And sometimes high quality education goes beyond just the educational pieces, because as a child, how can I even sit here and try to learn from you if I didn't even eat last night or this morning? How can I try to learn from you if we don't have running water at home? So I couldn't, I haven't taken a shower and I don't know when, and my clothes are dirty or they don't fit anymore. So it's like, it's encompassed with a lot of different things, a lot of different resources that are needed. And sometimes it's like the whole child and the whole family, because you have to go beyond it. And I think that's oftentimes where in the field of education, we hit a roadblock and we're like it's only so much we can do. But that's where those partnerships come in, where you're like, okay, well, we're partnering with this organization in this school so that we can make sure the kids have these things. And then once you get those little pieces in place, then you can move on. The last thing that I'll say about it is, I don't even know who I was talking to about this. It may have been you, Shalonda, but just saying that, when the parent is trying to figure out, what am I going to feed my child today? How am I going to get to work? If I even have a job and things of that nature, they don't have time to think about if this child is doing his homework. That's right, Bianca, Wraparound Services. If the child is doing his homework, they don't have time for that. They need those wraparound services. It's like, I need you to come in and help me out here. I was trying to not use all the terminology, so for those people that that don't know, Bianca, but you're right, wraparound services. And so, they don't have time to think about that. So it's like, we have to put some things in place to make sure that these parents have what they need as well, if they want that kind of support. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of them that want that kind of support. And sometimes we have to be able to recognize it and just put it out there so that they can access it, because sometimes they're not going to even come ask for the assistance, because I don't want you looking down on me like I can't take care of my kids. But this pandemic is literally uncovering a lot of stuff. We're able to see into these kids' homes. So we're knowing now, like, whoa. And as an educator, I had this quote that was behind me on the wall, and y'all, I had to have it. I had this one kid. Oh my gosh. Everybody had that one kid. But I would turn around and look at it, and it said, the child who is the hardest to love is the one who needs it the most. So he would come to my classroom and tear that thing down. So I would have to be like, child, I'm going to love on you because you need some love. Yeah. And come to find out, he needed some love. So I would see him in the hallway. I would always try to make sure I have breakfast. See him in the hallway. I'd be like, you hungry? Come get some of this food. And he'd come on in there eating stuff. And by the time he made it to my class, he was on chill mode, because I took time to recognize there's something missing. I had another one that was off the chains. Come to find out, he needed clothing and shoes and stuff. You know what I did? Found out what size shoes he wore. Just happened to have some new shoes in my closet there. Somebody bought them for me. I couldn't even wear them. And he came into the classroom, and I was like, help me clean up my classroom today, boy. You did no work. And so he come in helping me clean up, and I strategically placed them so that when he opened the closet, he would see them. He's so nosy. Of course, the first thing he did was pull it out to see what it was. Oh, these your shoes? I said, somebody had bought them for me, and they was too big. And I'm like, you don't wear them size shoes. And he was like, oh, they my size. I'm like, you want them? It's like, yeah. I was like, you can have them. Yeah, he wore them shoes every day. Now, I'm not going to say the kid's name, of course, but he was like the class clown. He was wearing some pink Uggs to school and a pink jacket. So we knew that was his clothes. He was a class clown because he didn't want anybody talking about him. And so I made it a point to just have randomly some clothes in the closet and some shoes. And he took it all. He wanted it. And I was like, well, you can wait till the end of the day to come back and get it. So one of I know you got from me. I don't care. I'm gonna put this on that. And then he walked in the door. Miss Coleman gave me these shoes. And I'm like, what are we telling about getting no shoes? These kids want me buy them some shoes. What's wrong with you? So again, it's making sure that they have what they need and their high quality education. They can't think through some of the things that's going on in the classroom. You worried about why they not doing your work, baby? They don't care nothing about your work. They going home to a house that ain't got no lights, that don't have no water. They don't even have no like back in the old days when we used to do no wieners to cut up in no spaghetti. Like they don't care nothing about your work. And we have so many teachers that are here like, oh, I'm gonna flunk you. Okay, you flunking this child gonna do what? Nothing, because they don't care. They can't care. And so again, the services, making sure that there are wraparound services for those parents, for those kids, and that there are opportunities for them to grow. And the last point is, when I was in Mississippi in school, we didn't go on college tours. We didn't know what these schools look like, what opportunities were offered there, how to get the scholarships, things of that nature, unless you came from a family that had that type of background, or unless it was a counselor, somebody that really liked you. And so they would pull you in and make sure you had those opportunities. When I got to Atlanta, y'all, my mind was blown. Like, I was one of the teachers that would take kids on college fairs, right? And into college tours. Y'all, I had these kids in Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Florida, everywhere on college tours so that they could have those opportunities. That's what high quality education looks like. It's leveling the playing field, because if they were anywhere else, they would not have known that these schools existed. They would only know, and no shade against it, because I got my doctorate from Clark, Atlanta. They would only know Clark, Atlanta, Spelman and Morehouse. And guess what they would think about that? I can afford to go there. So, I ain't going to school. They only know about Atlanta metropolitan and places like that. But I made sure that every kid that I could possibly impact, if they couldn't pay for it, I was trying to find the money to pay for it. Get on this bus. I'm about to take you somewhere. You need to see these things. You need to know that they exist. And so that's what high quality education looks like having the tools and resources there, and not just equality, but having equity and leveling the playing field.
Oh my gosh, you just said so much, because I think about when I was in school. And going back to the child that you was describing, Shawana, I know we talk about this all the time. Like, I used to always tell you, like, Shawana, you teaching kids who I was. Like, I was that kid. Nobody really knows this. Like, I got kicked out of school in 7th grade because I had a mouth. This mouth that I use now to speak on behalf of social justice work and stuff like that. Like, I've always was that kid that spoke out. I was always that kid that said the first thing that came to her mind. I kind of didn't care. And it was also because I was dealing with also things at home that I couldn't really talk about, that I didn't know what to say. I didn't know how to say it. So school was my outlet. And I remember that time my principal got tired. And he's actually a consultant now too. And I don't know where he is. And I laugh at him all the time, because I was like, he said, oh, you got to go. You got to leave my class. You got to leave my school. So I ended up getting back in school. But I say that to say this is like, those kids who you taught, and like I see, Dr. Johnson and Bianca who are tuning in, like those students that you teach, like I understand, what you all are going through, what you have experienced. And probably next time I may do a double whammy and have all of you all on to talk about things. And also Lindsay, who I also work with, because there are a lot of stuff we're not really discussing that needs to be had as a conversation, where, being in the field of education, and it compensates so much. Oh my gosh, like the education field is really almost like politics. Well, I ain't gonna say it is politics, because it's like it ties into everything in our everyday life. Like, you can never be too old to get an education. You can never be too young to start educating yourself. And so, and then going into the second part that you talked about, when you were saying, not just I can't remember. I'm losing my train of thought. I'm sorry. But just going into what you were talking about as far as the opportunities for students. Like, I remember in Mississippi, right, we had got this Gear Up money. My counselor, oh my gosh, she was so awesome, Miss Hodges, and she's now I think in Memphis. But she made sure when we were seniors, because we had this gear up funding that we had got from the state, that we went on college tours. So we went to Jackson State. Some people decided to sign up for Ole Miss and stuff like that. If it had not been for her taking me to a college tour, she's also a soror too of yours, I will say, like, I would not have known what Jackson State was. That was my first time ever hearing about a Jackson State because of the background I had came from, because of the social economic status, like, of my upbringing. So it was like, I think about those times when you're sharing your ideas about eclectic ed and everything, and it's like, dang, I sometimes don't know where I would have been if I didn't have people to invest in me education wise, or invest in opportunities for me so that I can be on the other side of where I am right now. And so I want to say to you and to those of you who are tuning in that are educators, like, keep doing what you're doing, because you're going to change lives, and you're going to continue to change lives, because what's in you is in you. And once you're educated, you're always educated, which is why it was like, although you into the nonprofit sector, you're still an educator to me, because you still have the love and affection of, like, I still got to reach back and save children, and that's just who you are. And that's what I've always admired about you and appreciate you for the work that you do, even when you don't give yourself enough credit, because you are really doing it. And like Miss Bianca said, speak, Dr. Coleman, because you do have a voice that so many children out here need.
I received that. I received that.
So
Yeah, I'm really thankful just for having this platform. You don't even know, you've pushed me to go ahead and do some things that I've been pushing off. For those of you that don't know, I have a web series called The Edupreneur that I started, I think, last year, that I haven't really done a whole lot with this year, but it will kick back up probably next week, looks like it. But then under Eclectic Education, and just as myself as a consultant, just talking a little bit about education, nonprofits, and things of that nature. So super excited about doing those things, but even more excited about having been here today on Politics for the Culture. No matter how much I put you off and be like, girl, I ain't doing it. Excited about being here. And I just thank you so much for giving me the platform to even talk about some of these things and where we are. And again, for all of you educators that are out there, whether you're in the field of education, you're looking to go into the field of education, or you're looking to transition out the field of education, know that the things that you're doing, they have not gone unnoticed, that everyone around the world is now singing praises to educators. I think that COVID-19, though, is something that, none of us really wanted to see happen. It needed to happen so that we could have the wool pulled from over our eyes and people could see who the real heroes are. And some of the real heroes outside of those on the front line in a medical career are you educators. And I'm so happy that you all are still doing what you're doing. I'm on the front lines with you, still trying to help do some of those things. And I'm looking forward to what everything is going to look like post this pandemic, and now having a FLOTUS in office that that's going to, I'm just going to stand on it. She's going to make some things happen, because educators deserve more than what they are getting now. And there needs to be a shift. There definitely needs to be a shift.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out with me. I greatly appreciate it. I'm honored to even have Dr. Coleman on my platform to share her life experience in the field of education. And like Dr. Johnson said, educators are definitely heroes, and I so agree. And I'm gonna be honest, I came from the background I came from, I didn't realize how important educators were. So for me, I want to just say from the bottom of my heart to all educators out there, like, I thank you. I appreciate you. Although I don't have any children that are inside of the classroom, I still have mentees that I adore and I love, and I have been able to mentor over the years to know, like, what it's like for them. So again, thank you so much. And for tuning in. We will be back with the next week's episode. I haven't figured out the topic yet, but I'm sure it'll probably be something picking up on this to elevate education as we go into this year with a new transition of political leaders, because the Department of Education is about to change, y'all. So I'm really excited to see now that we done kicked Betsy out. But again, thanks for tuning in to Politics for the Culture, where we speak freely and unapologetically.
We are headed over to Instagram for the after party. So y'all can join us over there just for open, candid conversation. We'll be answering any questions or anything that you have questions about. And I guess Shawana can drop our handles if you aren't following us. I am at Dr. Shacole, SHAECOLE on IG. And she is
at Shalonda.Spencer on Instagram, but you can also share our Facebook Live to other people. You can like us on Facebook, and you can also go to our website and subscribe to the newsletters and things that I try to send out about the podcast. And you can also follow Politics for the Culture on Apple Podcasts, as well as YouTube and Spotify and all the other things. So yeah, just type in Politics for the Culture and Google it, and you'll find all the sites. So thank you again for tuning in.
Bye.